What up, friends? I'm James, your host, and today I'm going to be doing my first ever album review, and that is from Malibu Ken. Malibu Ken is a collaboration between electronic musician Tobacco and prolific underground rapper Aesop Rock, both respectable artists in their own right, and prior to this release, it was very much a typical Aesop Rock release. It was fairly silent, no real show. They released 2 singles, and that's pretty much it. No extra information at all. It just dropped after that. This is also the first album that Aesop Rock has been a part of since his collaborations with Blockhead, which ended after None Shall Pass in 2007. And because of this, it adds an interesting dynamic that we haven't seen from Aesop Rock in a while now. So, how did he stack up? Well, let's take a look. The album begins with Corn Maze and Tuesday, 2 fairly solid tracks that kick off the record, and they're actually typical Aesop Rock fare if you really think about it. The songs deal with isolation and following trends and things like that, most notably on Corn Maze. And the music is also very interesting. Tobacco being an electronic producer, it's very electronic, but it also has a lot of chiptune influences I've found. And it's a sound that I haven't really heard a lot of in mainstream music, or just in normal music in general, and I really did like it. During Corn Maze, it also adds an interesting dynamic when it starts off very ominously and kind of a bit empty and hollow, but it turns erratic to kind of represent the changes in opinions, the constant flip-flopping that people have, and that's what the song is really about. After that, we get to Tuesday, which is also kind of a typical Aesop Rock song, talking about just an average Tuesday in his daily life. It reminds me of songs like Lotta Years and Kirby off of his prior album, The Impossible Kid. It's a very quirky song, it's very humorous, and he talks about just living in a little barn that he actually seems to make Impossible Kid in as well, so it provides an interesting insight into that whole sphere of Aesop Rock. And the music on this one is a little more fuzzy, it's a little more raw, which I did like. It kind of counters the more clean and very electronic influences on the prior song, so it's an interesting contrast. We get into probably my favorite song on the record, Save Our Ship. And this is when the chiptune influences, I feel, actually really come to the forefront. The bass is super punchy and the synth is very ominous and just looming over the entire track. It's a very heavy presence. And that sound is very reminiscent of Sega Genesis soundtracks, I found. Whether that was intentional or not by our friend Tobacco here, I really did appreciate it because it's not a sound that I hear very often. As for the lyrics on this track, it's probably some of my favorite as well. He basically kind of talks about the struggle of everyday life in modern America, the plight of the working man, and how we have all these news stories with these awful events happening all over the country, and nothing is changing or helping the people that are working to just survive in the country. And Brock isn't always shy when expressing his political views, and this is just one of the ones I feel that is reminiscent of something like 9 to 5ers Anthem off of Labor Days by Aesop as well. I feel like he has a really deep understanding of the problems of the country and kind of the plight of the working man as well, so it makes his lyrics very relatable because I feel he also probably went through a lot of this stuff. Fortunately, after the songs, we get to probably my 2 least favorite songs on the album, Swordbox and Dog Years. They're kind of sandwiched between 2 of the better songs as well, so it kind of highlights how a bit samey they are, with Swordbox especially. The lyrics are probably the most obvious on the entire album, talking about politicians and deceit and things like that, and although I do think it's musically very interesting, and I do like how the synth during the chorus gets a bit of a cocky feel, kind of reminiscent of what Aesop's talking about when it's about the politician manipulating the people almost like a magician doing a card trick, and how he's pulling $1 out of everyone's pocket. It also highlights what I feel might be one of the main problems on this record sometimes, is that the flows are very samey in certain instances. Maybe not only on this album, but also compared to prior works that Aesop Rock has done in the past. This song in particular really reminds me of songs like Rings or Dark Heart News. The flows feel very familiar and a bit safe for Aesop, and I feel like he could have enhanced this, especially with lyrics about deceit. It's pretty dark. I feel like he could have gone for a more manic verse or something like that, like he did during the chorus. And Dog Years is another one I think is a bit weak as well, although this one has the opposite problem. This song is more down-tempo, talking about how Aesop Rock likes his frugal lifestyle. He likes kind of not being in the public eye. It also talks about how Aesop Rock has to try to balance the grind and his relaxation as well. Being a smaller rapper, granted he is very respected, but he is a smaller rapper, so he has to adjust himself on when he wants to put all his effort into his releases and his music, or when he wants to just get away for 4 years in a barn in the woods somewhere. So it's an interesting topic, but the problem here is the music is probably the least interesting on the album. The lyrics are a stream of consciousness lyrical style, kind of slam poetry-esque, so this more down-tempo beat I feel doesn't really capture how frustrated he is with himself on flip-flopping on whether he wants to be alone or whether he wants to actually really work hard on an album and put something out for people. I feel like a more manic styled beat, or at least something more fast-paced. It doesn't even have to be super experimental or anything, but something more fast-paced would have fit the lyrics more, especially in this delivery that Aesop Rock is giving us, because the flow is actually very cool. It's very different compared to some of Aesop Rock's other flows, where they're more slower, they're more calculated. This one is more raw, I feel, so I wish the beat would have actually compensated for that. The next song is one of my favorites from the album, Acid King, the lead single from this project. It tells the story of Ricky Kasso and how he killed his friends in the woods in New York, and I feel like Aesop was infatuated with the story because Kasso went to the same high school and lived in the same state as Aesop Rock himself. And all throughout this track, you can tell it's building up to something. Aesop Rock is just relaying this story with all this information and minor details on Kasso's life and things like that, while the beat in the background is just kind of building up and building up. And I do like how he adds some other themes into this track as well, not only telling the story of Kasso, but he uses it to relay a message of scapegoating and how people often scapegoat music and art and different things like that of being of the devil and influencing the young kids to do awful, awful things. When we all know that's not true. Even throughout this track, there's great flow, great lyrics, the vibe is very sinister, and the background vocals only help to add to that sinister vibe. I really like it a lot, and it kind of culminates in this beat switch at the end, which almost adds a bit of a synth pop flair to it, which was not what I expected when I first heard this track, but it was pulled off so well in subverting your expectations, and the last chant and repetition of the few verses almost sound like Aesop is channeling Kasso himself, or that it's coming from Kasso himself. So it just adds, even during that lighter beat switch at the end, it still adds an ominous and sinister feeling, which I think really enhances the song as a whole. Suicide Big Gulp after this track kind of offers a change in sound a bit. It's more funky, it's lighter, and it's almost more beautiful in a way. The synth and the general sound of this track has a very ethereal vibe. It's dark, but it's also engaging, and the lyrics are probably the hardest to decipher so far as well, I've found. From what I gather, they deal on self-doubt, and self-doubt on Aesop's rhymes, on his lifestyle, on whether or not he should actually be isolating himself so much, whether or not he can actually connect with people, all of which are pretty prominent themes on Aesop Rock's work, especially on the Impossible Kid and Skeleton. I really do like the scratching that's added on the third verse as well. It adds a raw element that isn't really present on the album up until this point. So it's very appreciated and also reminds us that this is a hip-hop record at its core. We're not just dealing with an electronic album with someone rapping over it. It takes influences from a bunch of different places, and it really makes a very unique sound. There's no chorus on the album, but I do think the song flows well, and it's good at subverting what you would expect from Aesop Rock, because he's very hook-driven in certain instances, more so than I think some people may expect, especially on his last few albums. So I like how he's experimenting with different song structures. 1 + 1 = 13 is another highlight for me, all on the string. It's like a string of beauty. It's more fun even than the previous song on the album. It probably is the lightest song so far, at least musically. The synth adds a very quaint vibe. I like it a lot. The twinkling synth that's added in alongside to that other one in verses 2 and 3 also add a very interesting vibe as well. I like the subtle beauty that comes in there. It's very almost star-like, looking up at the sky during the nighttime. And it kind of makes me think of Rings as well, when he's talking about just laying on the grass looking up at the sky. So maybe a callback? I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy. And the lyrics on this song also represent beauty in a way, but in Aesop's darker lyrical style. Lyrics on this song talk about the beauty of life, but also the ugliness of life as well. Whenever he talks about something positive, it's countered by bad luck and something negative and life taking its course on things. It's overall a message about taking the good with the bad, I feel, and it just shows how life is all pleasure and all pain as well. There's a duality, and I feel like that duality is prevalent on a lot of songs on this record, both with Aesop himself and with life as a whole. Churro comes after this. It's okay. It's a bit of a dirtier sound, almost kind of EBM inspired, I found, but to me the song just feels like an extension of 1 + 1 = 13. I didn't feel like it has much of an identity on its own. The chorus is funny, it has Aesop Rock's dark humor, and I did appreciate that. It's about life and nature keeping us grounded, but like I said before, that's also the topic of the previous song, and I feel like this one just didn't do much to differentiate itself from it. And now we get to the last song on the album, Purple Moss, which I really do like a lot. This is probably my second favorite song right after Save Our Ship, and this is probably one of the more melancholy songs on the album. Not really aggressive or anything like that, but more contemplative, and the lyrics reflect this as well. It's about Aesop Rock looking back on his life and about his accomplishments and where he's wondering where he's going to go next. Will he go there or there or there? And I feel like the repetition of the lyric Empire Builder is a very important part of this song, because in repeating this line near the last half of the track, he reinforces the idea of everybody can build their own empire as long as they do what they love, which I feel is probably one of Aesop Rock's core life philosophies. And this is also enhanced by this guitar sample that comes in during the song as well. It's probably the only guitar sample that you ever hear in this album, and it adds a raw and human element to this track and to this album as a whole, which was previously very synthetic but in a good way. But adding that guitar just adds to the melancholy nature of the sound and the lyrics. And even though Aesop Rock is very prolific and he's doing what he loves, he wonders if he can keep this up, and I think he also acknowledges that not everybody can have the chance to do this. That he's lucky to be in a position where he is, where he can do what he loves, but some people don't ever get there. So it's an interesting way to end the album, and I feel it's very fitting for him as well, because it's not all sunshines and daisies with good old Aesop Rock. So that's about it. Aesop Rock, Tobacco, and Malibu Ken. they came together with a very interesting project. It's very unique and quirky for the rap game right now. I'm not really hearing anything like this. Some people might be a bit averse to the more electro side of this project. It might not be as hip-hop focused as some people would like, but I do think that this collaboration takes us back to kind of the fun and unexpected nature that Aesop Rock used to have with when he collaborated with people like Blockhead and things like that on some of his earlier albums. I really hope that they continue this project in the future whenever they have some spare time or something like that and enhance it even further, maybe even take those chiptune elements into account even more, maybe take some from different eras of the chiptune sound. That's always a possibility. It also occurs to me that maybe they can even try doing what Aesop Rock and Blockhead used to do back in the day when they would trade off, where sometimes Blockhead produces a track, and in this case sometimes Tobacco produces a track, then sometimes Ace produces a track. You never know. It might be kind of a mishmash of sounds, but it might be kind of interesting. And I will say that I hope that Aesop Rock experiments with his flows a bit more on the next album. Sometimes they can feel a little bit samey, especially after so many albums of Aesop Rock on his own. We hear a lot of his flows, so to newer fans this might be interesting, but to fans of Aesop Rock, I feel like sometimes he can retread ground a little bit and stay in his comfort zone. So overall, I hope he just expands on that a little bit. I know he can because he's such a great artist, and I really look forward to hearing what we will hear from them in the future. All in all, I will bestow upon Malibu Ken a light 8. I think this was a great project, and now I'm going to be talking about something different, because at the end of this show, I wanted to talk about the album art a little bit. I'm a graphic designer. I like album art. I get into a lot of artists through album art, so I feel like it would be fun to take a look at it, because Malibu Ken's album artwork is just disgusting, but in a great way. It's all about the imperfections of humanity in Aesop Rock himself, so what better way to portray that than to make a Ken doll look absolutely terrifying. The color combination is garish, the general style of it is just very unpleasant to look at, because that is the goal. That is what was supposed to happen. I wanted to die. And I feel like looking at this album cover, the music might surprise you, because it doesn't fit the music that much, but it fits the lyrics and the themes and imperfections that we find in Aesop Rock's lyrics. So I think they did a great job. I think the album cover is great in its own unique way. And that's that. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for watching my first album review ever made. Please tell me what you thought of this album, good old Malibu Ken over here, in the comments down below. If you don't like my opinion because it's probably very stupid, please wait to kill me until I make some other videos. Give me a chance. And if you have anything you recommend me listen to and review, please do so as well, because I'm just starting out. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But jokes aside, thank you everybody for watching, and until the next one, farewell.